Hey guys, what is up? It is me, Pagey, here once again with another video on Superman Lois Season 4. So we are 3 episodes deep into this 4th and final season of Superman Lois, with the 4th episode only a couple of days away, with the series finale, aka episode 10, set to air on December 2nd, I think, from memory. Bringing not just the show of Superman Lois to an end, but just DC's reign and I guess existence on the CW officially to an end, to a close. And if you count Superman Lois as the Arrowverse, this then, therefore officially wraps up the Arrowverse. But of course, we do know that season 4 was not meant to be the final season, but was made into the final season due to, well, the obvious stuff happening at the CW. Originally, it was meant to go for, I think it was 7 seasons, and as you'd expect, when all of a sudden you go down to 4 seasons, with pretty much like no real prep time, I guess, some storylines are either very condensed down to fit that shorter runtime, or some storylines and ideas are just scrapped as a whole. And recently we had the showrunners for Superman Lois talk about what did not make it into the final season, as well as teasing the series finale coming our way in early December. But of course, throughout the video, be sure to let me know in the comment section down below your thoughts on this. I'm always curious to hear what you guys are thinking and whether you would have wanted to see these ideas or main idea that's been, sort of just scrapped because they didn't have the time. And yeah, just your general thoughts in regards to everything else we go over. And of course, if you're going to enjoy the video, want to drop a like, takes 2 seconds. Now, this is coming from Entertainment Weekly. Hopefully, I do remember to put the link in the description down below, as I'm only including about 2/3 of it, roughly, of the article, as some of it dived into things either not overly relating directly to the show of Superman and Lois, or it was like referencing / comparing to other shows, some of which I have not seen. So it would be weird to really give an opinion on something I haven't seen. So just a heads up. So hopefully the link's down there in the description down below. As Superman and Lois takes flight for a shortened final season, there is one iconic piece of Superman lore that did not fit into the story. Showrunners Todd Helbing and Brent Fletcher reveal that while they wanted to include the Phantom Zone in some capacity, they just couldn't make it work due to limited timing. We wanted to pack as much story as we could into 10 episodes and give the fans as much of a Superman and Lois Lane story that we could, Todd Helbing tells Entertainment Weekly. We were trying to do our version of the Phantom Zone for 4 seasons, and it was one of these things where it was like, it just doesn't quite work. Now, I think this is an interesting thing because there's always been like this, like Superman does a lot of stuff in a very faithful, like Superman and Lois, might I say, does all this, like a bunch of Superman stuff in the comics in a very faithful way, or at least represents it in a faithful way, though it might not be exactly what it is in the comics, like looks wise or origin wise or whatever it is. But there's also like just the way they adapt stuff has a bit of a twist. Like if they do Paradox, like it's got a bit of a twist or whatever it might be, or even the stuff last season, whether it was with Bruno Mannheim and Intergang, or even with Doomsday and the origins of Doomsday and stuff. It's always got a bit of a twist there. So I would have been very intrigued to see what a Phantom Zone in the context of Superman Lois as a show and how they usually adapt stuff would have been like, and also what would have been in there. Because I think you could have put some very interesting things in there, especially because we've had this Superman for like 20 years in this world, that maybe there's some stuff that he's put into the Phantom Zone, potentially. So that would have been an interesting thing to see, but I understand why it was scrapped, because I think if you're going to do the Phantom Zone, you just don't do it for an episode. You probably have a decent amount of fun with it, like they had with the Bizarro world back in season 2. With only 10 episodes to wrap up the ensemble storylines, Fletcher says they had to really plan it out surgically on what to include in the final season, but aside from the Phantom Zone, they're proud of how nothing else major was left on the cutting room floor. It's pretty dramatic the whole way through, Fletcher says. There's not really any downbeats. It gets moving pretty quickly from the beginning, and it goes for 10 episodes, so that was one of the things that really worked in our favor. They tease that fans will be surprised by where it all ends in the series finale. I don't think people are going to think we're ending the show the way that we are, Fletcher says. On top of that, there's a lot of iconic moments that have the things that are really big in Superman canon, so we're excited to see how the fans react to those moments. Now, of course, I think this interview was done before episode 1 came out. I think this was released during the premiere week. Because it was referring to like finale stuff and stuff that wasn't in this final season, I didn't think it was too much of a thing to rush to. So there's already some things that, in regards to like Superman canon and stuff that have already happened that he's probably referring to, whether it is Death of Superman or even the stuff with like Jonathan getting his powers recently in episode 3, and, some other stuff that might happen in the next couple of episodes, and even like Steelworks being set up and stuff. Just little things like that. And also even the flashback stuff with Lex Luthor as well. I'm sure that's what he's referencing to there in regards to stuff that we've already seen. But it is good to hear that they didn't have any other major things that they were hoping to do that have been scrapped. Obviously, there's stuff that would have been like big bads and stuff, like for season 5, 6, 7, whatever they might have been, whether they included Lex Luthor, whether they included like a character like Brainiac or whatever it might have been. But none of them, that's just like that's just for their singular season. Something like that's overarching for a show, or something they were planning to do in season 4 and they had to scrap it because they had to wrap up the show. The only thing that seems that they really were potentially going to include in this season but couldn't was the Phantom Zone. So it's good that we're not in this thing. It's like, oh, we have this list of 5 major things we wanted to do, and the CW screwed us out of that. So sure, there would have been some major stuff in season 5, 6, and 7, but in regards to season 4 as a singular season, it seems like the Phantom Zone is the only major thing that we're missing out on, which, once again, it would have been very intriguing to see what their take on it would have been. But at the same time, I don't love the Phantom Zone, but I do think it's an interesting concept that, especially with how Superman and Lois does things, would have been interesting to see what they would do with it. Getting the opportunity to land the show on their own terms is rare, and the showrunners didn't take that for granted. There's a unique pressure to ending a show because all shows are somewhat judged on that final episode, and so you have to take a swing, Fletcher says. We originally had an idea that we had to change a little bit because it was more of a season 7 idea than a season 4, but we're really happy with the adjustment and it's a swing. We think the ending is unexpected, but we also think it does all the things that this show does. It highlights family and the emotions and character, and it really puts a prism on distills, might I say, what we think makes this show so special. The showrunners want fans to feel overwhelmed with the feeling and the sentimentality of what this show was. Fletcher adds, it's meant to make you leave with big feelings. We want you to miss the show when it's over, so hopefully it works. We were happy with it when we were done, for sure. Now, this has me pretty interested to see what they are going to do with the finale, because based on what we can see from because set photos weren't a big thing with even just Superman and Lois as a show as a whole, but in particular the final season, because it was really filmed in that downtown Smallville area for the most part, where there was really ever no major set photos because it's out of the way. If you don't know the context of the situation, the logistical side, that set is like in not whoop, just out of nowhere, but it's not easily accessible. Like, it's not downtown Vancouver where someone could be going to 7-Eleven and be like, oh, look, let me get my phone out and quickly film that. It's not in that type of area. But I personally think the show, based off the set photos that we did get, is going to have a flash forward. But I also, I have seen a theory about like maybe what happens to Superman after the events of episode 3 and how that changes him as like an actual living being, not like personality wise and stuff like that, but how he functions. And I probably will talk about that. I sort of want to watch this week's episode before I make a video on that. But I think it's an interesting theory, but hopefully this episode that's coming up might shine a light on it in some way, shape, or form. But I'll probably do that video next week. But it's just, yeah, it's an interesting theory that could also lead into this finale as well. But Helbing does say that the final episode has hopefulness and sadness to it. There's love, there's every feeling, he adds. And I think in some of the most successful, we watched a lot of series finales and talked about a lot of them, what worked and what didn't. We wanted to emulate some of the best as far as what an audience is going to feel when they stop watching it. I think a good surprise is necessary for a finale to work, Fletcher says. You didn't think, you didn't exactly think that was how they were going to land it, but then when you see the landing, that it feels organic and part of the story that you've been watching. We talked a lot about it and had drinks after work and talked more about it, and then would wake up and talk about it, and hopefully we came up with something that people liked. And I agree that even if it's the finale as a whole, or even the final 10 minutes of a finale, like that, it's what people remember a lot about your show. Like, if you don't, not even the final season, you're gonna have a pretty average, if not that great final season. But if you do a pretty good finale, especially the final 10 minutes, it's what people leave with. The most recent finale, especially, it's like a series finale of a long-running show that a lot of us probably would have watched, was The Flash. I know a lot of people don't like the opening 15 minutes because it has all that weird villain stuff, but I think the closing like 10 minutes of that season, or that just the show as a whole, are borderline perfect, outside of the weird Cecile proposal. That was weird. But it nails it in regards to a lot of those different elements, and that's sort of what Brent Fletcher and Todd Helbing are referring to here. It's like how you leave the show and what people feel when they leave. And if you don't watch the final, if we reference The Flash again, because it was the most recent like big series finale in regards to a long-running show, if you don't feel some sort of emotion when that show ends based on the final scenes and like what happens there in particular, not just the show ending, but what those scenes contain, you know, you probably weren't a fan of the show anyway, but if you were, like, those scenes hit you, and that's what they're going to try and aim to do with Superman and Lois. And I feel like they're going to nail it, because whenever they've really had to, you know, approach that, I think they've done a really good job. The final thing here is that Helbing reflects on a series finale they didn't love when it first aired, but has now come to appreciate it in a new way. If we were doing a Bizarro World series finale, it may be Superman or Bizarro Lois and the boys in some prison cell like Seinfeld, he says. At first, when I watched the finale, I was like, I don't know, but as I've gotten away from it, that's exactly where these four idiots should be. So it is very subjective, and we were trying to get people to react collectively in a very similar way. So hopefully we landed that one. So which makes me very interesting where these characters end the show, whether it is the Kent family of Superman, Lois, Jordan, and Jonathan, but also maybe even some of the supporting characters as well. Obviously, your main characters you need to focus on are the Kent family, but even where like Lex Luthor finishes, for example, I feel like Lex Luthor is probably going to end up in prison again. I think, maybe, I don't know, maybe he might die. I'm not too sure what's going to happen with Lex. But the Seinfeld one's a very interesting reference there. Like, I don't think it's like the finale is going to be like Seinfeld, but more in regards to doing something that people don't expect, that people might have an issue with at first, but as they go along with it, like, wait, this makes sense where these characters end, whether it's based off the show as a whole or just the situation at the time. But yeah, that's the Entertainment Weekly article. I have one final thing here because it's referring to this week's episode, and I don't know if I'll do another Superman Lois video, and it wasn't worth doing a video just on this, so I thought I'd include it here. But this is from TV Line, so not Entertainment Weekly, this is TV Line, and this is them teasing episode 4, and this is from their Inside Line section, I think it was. But someone asked, we all know Superman will be alive at some point, but can you give me any spoilers about Superman and Lois's final season? The double episode premiere was excellent. TV Line said, as glimpsed at the end of episode 3, Supes or Superman is alive and kicking thanks to General Lane's selfless heroics. We're not saying the Kent family's problems have come to an end, far from it, but you'll be happy to know that episode 4 is a breath of fresh air, slowing down the drama to throw Chrissy and Kyle a wedding they'll never forget. Will the Man of Steel be in attendance? You'll just have to tune in and find out. I don't know if that's necessarily spoiling that Superman shows up, though I wouldn't be surprised if Superman is like properly alive by the end of this this week's episode 4. Don't know if he's necessarily out of that little containment cell, but he'll be like, if Jordan or Jonathan goes there, they can talk to him. Or if he's, Lara's there, his mother, like the hologram, she can talk to him. Like, he's actually like responsive, but maybe he has to stay in that little recovery sort of chamber thing for a bit longer. I know people aren't too happy about this Chrissy and Carl thing. They would, like, they know the audience. Like, I think if you've watched Superman Lois, you know that they know the audience, and especially with this final season and those supporting characters, they're not just going to like completely slow down the show. They're just slowing down like the drama of it all, and there'll be some slight happy moments because it's just been trauma. Like, it's been dramatic trauma and like emotional stuff for the opening 3 episodes. So they can, people can smile on this episode, I guess. But we know Lex Luthor's not gonna take a week off. Lex Luthor's still going to be around there messing up. We don't know what he's going to send Doomsday out to do. And of course, they're still going to be dealing with the General Lane stuff and potential other issues around that. So I think the Chrissy and Kyle thing is a breath of fresh air for a part of episode 4. But then they'll still have to keep the ball rolling with this season's story. They can't just, have a roadblock. There's still going to be some development there. But I'm just intrigued to see how they mesh it all together. But yeah, guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, it'd be awesome if you could drop a like and show support. Let me know in the comment section down below your various thoughts and everything we went over this video. Always curious to read what you guys are thinking. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, and I'll catch you guys later. Goodbye.